Hi, and welcome to Art Laughs with me, Verity Babs. Today I spoke to Ross Smith. I'm here today with Ross. Ross, please introduce yourself.
Hello, I am Ross Smith, comedian and art lover.
And you did art.
Yes, I did. I think it was like a really good sort of introduction to comedy, actually, because I went to art school because it was the thing I enjoyed most in school, and it was the thing that after sort of all my options ran out with doing anything, let's say, productive to society, I decided to do a degree in fine art. My A level I actually got for art was I got a U, an ungraded, which is that's not even like an F. That's like, you've wasted my time in having to mark this. So I went to university to do it at Nottingham Trent, and I'll be honest with you, I really didn't like art school because I found that everybody there sort of dressed like they were in the 50s, and they were from really sort of privileged backgrounds, and they were just really, it was a lot of people just standing around going, yeah, it's really interesting, what does it mean? And you'd be like, well, that's just a glass of water that someone's left on the side, that's not even the art. It was a lot of sort of emperor's new clothes,
Yeah.
kind of thing. And I think it just kind of taught me how to bullshit, really, which is, I think a lot of the time has sort of really done me a favor in comedy, because it just means that you can sort of make something of nothing. So you can talk and you can kind of go, oh yes, but it means this and it means that and it means whatever. So that's what art school was like for me, and ended up getting a 2-2 in fine art, which is not a degree that employers are looking for, really.
Well, I found the same thing of I did art history, which is like for people who want to be artists but aren't quite good, who aren't good enough at art to do it. But that thing of making, bullshit connections, and it's that thing with art students, which I think is kind of universally, everyone loves to hate art students, and especially art students who dress like that. I remember going to exhibition opening, and there were loads of art students there, and one of them had a tail that they'd sewn into their trousers. And it brought me great joy to know that 50% of the art students in that room would probably go into finance in the next 10 years. That brings me a lot of joy.
I mean, I'd like to know where some of them are today. I just remember that it was kind of good, because as a comedian, I think you've got to be, a lot of people ask you, were you the class clown? And that's not true at all. You weren't ever the class clown. I think comedians, or good comedians, they're always the observers. They're always the people who were sort of like Tim from The Office, where they were just looking around going is everybody else seeing this? They were just observing. And that's how I felt in art school, because I can remember we were doing a crit, that used to annoy me as well, that they don't have time to say the word critical or critical review or whatever. It's crit. And there was a student a year above me showing this work, and he'd gone around the studio and he'd painted all the pipes and all the things that different colors. So say he'd painted a pipe orange, it would smell of strawberries, and that was meant to sort of shock the system, man. It's wait, that's orange, that should smell of oranges. And I can remember everybody went around going, yeah, it's really this, and they just, they had to try and bullshit. And I remember they all looked at me, and I just said, it just reminds me of, have you ever seen the kids show Balamori, where the castle's painted pink, and they all just looked at me and nobody laughed, and I just thought, this is good for me, but right now it doesn't feel good for me. I still don't understand how one piece of art can be better than another piece of art, really. Technical ability is almost looked down upon in art, which I find so bizarre. It's the painting really does look like the person, and people are like, oh, that's awful, I'd rather it was just a line and a dot, actually. It's very
But what does it mean? And that's the thing of the whole art system, is kind of built in a way where humor has just been completely sucked out of it, because as soon as you say, as soon as you call a spade, or as soon as you make something funny out of it, it loses that kind of, the sturdy foundations of art which have been built over the last 200 years of rich white men being like, this is good and I own it. So as soon as
Yeah.
you bring that comedy into it, it kind of dissipates. But what you've picked today, the work of Daniel Johnston, and there are some other kind of similar artists who are sort of bringing that humor, I guess, back.
Just the idea of outsider in anything is like why I've chosen Daniel Johnston, is because I personally like the idea of sort of trying anything, or putting some sort of weight behind it, or intellectualizing something. I think kind of ruins it in a way, kind of takes away from the sort of its rawness and its sort of innocence and its just creativity. And with Daniel Johnston, who's like, if you haven't heard of him, he's kind of very, very niche. I would encourage everybody out there to go and watch a documentary called The Devil and Daniel Johnston. It's just he was just a very odd guy from sort of West Virginia in America. He was from a very religious background, and he had a lot of problems with mental illness in his life. But he was just this outsider, like sort of recording artist, and just came from nowhere. And I just love the idea that it's he just prolifically produced music. 8 albums in a year. All on tape, all on these crappy little sort of keyboards that he'd do, but they're just genius. And also he'd have this artwork that would just, I don't know, I think people relate to it. I think people relate to the idea of not trying, because I think that in comedy all the time. I watch some comedians and they're really polished and they've got everything tightly set, and they've got their type 5 and their type 10. But to be honest, nothing makes me laugh more than just your friend down the pub not understanding why that they're making you laugh. I've laughed more at You've Been Framed, at somebody falling over at a wedding. And that's my point really with Daniel Johnston, is just that he's prolifically got this sort of comic book style art, and it's very childish. Same with his music. But it's just great. And I think we have a tendency to sort of over intellectualize things, where, in comedy, I just think like it should be boiled down to, is it funny? And with art, I think it should be boiled down to, does it provoke? Does it make you feel anything? And even if that thing is, it's childish and it's rubbish, that's still something, which I suppose is the point of art.
It's interesting because talking about this like over intellectualization, is that in art criticism, I think that people do really respect art that takes a lot of time, has been well thought through, and the thing looks like the thing it's meant to be, and we find it quite easy to respect that. But the most kind of powerful and like provocative and art that we have an emotional response to is often not that super rigorously planned, very highly detailed work. Sometimes it is these sort of very relatable kind of cartoony things that Daniel Johnston makes, or they are the stuff that abstract artists make that really kind of find they're very powerful. But as soon as someone finds out that took 20 minutes, we sort of go, but that kind of messes with our idea of what art is worth and like value if it's taken not very much time, even if that is then emotionally impactful.
I mean, for me, it's just the fact that like there's no pretension there. There's no trying. There's no. It's authentic in a way that you can't get from a lot of other art, because I'm a nerd and I just equate everything back to comedy, and just whenever I see somebody be trying to be weird or somebody trying to do something that they're not, I always just think, well, I know those people. I know those people who have no other option but to do comedy, who have no other option but to do these things. And that's why I like that kind of art. Daniel Johnston he's got this, there's a piece called Symbolic Visions of Daniel Johnston. It's kind of his like Rosetta Stone of all the characters that he uses, because he uses similar sort of characters. And you can see that like he had a problem with schizophrenia and manic depression his whole life, and it put him in mental institutions, and his family were really worried about it a lot of the time. And he died 2019, late 2019. And he had that his whole life. But, in the drawings, you might see just a sort of really rudimentary figure of a man with no head. His head is sawn off. But then you look into that and you think, well, what he's basically saying there is that it's a guy who's lost his mind. It's a guy who has literally lost his mind. It's been sawn off. You cannot see a head in there. And then you just think, well, he's just representing himself there. And that, to me, is far more relatable than a Damien Hirst with sort of sheep. And I think that's what we're all looking for in any kind of expression or art, is not to feel this mad emotion and to cry at the Louvre. It's to feel like, oh, I know that feeling, I know that guy, I know exactly what you're saying with that. And it's just I think he's the phrase gets thrown around a lot, but I think he's a genius. I really do.
And that kind of comes back as well to comedy, this idea of what we find appealing in comedy is that reaction of, this is funny because I can imagine you doing it, or I can imagine me doing that. And sometimes, like you say, people can have these amazing jokes that are very, when things are clever funny, where you don't laugh aloud, but you go, or you laugh by clapping because it's clever. Whereas, like your friend down the pub, or when a comedian interacts with an audience member and it's completely improv, that can be the funniest bit of the show, because that's like, oh, this is what they're really like. Personal, getting to know them kind of thing. And that can be the best bit of a gig.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I guess for me as well, part of why I like this art so much is because I feel so different to it myself, with the music and with anything else. Like, I think that everybody has this idea of being a perfectionist and this imposter syndrome, this idea of, well, there's levels that I'm not hitting, and there's heights I'm not reaching, and I'm writing jokes, but they're not good enough, and they're not this, and they're not that. And, I need to be like James Acaster, and I need to like write an hour that is completely scripted and there's nothing wasted and all these things. But at the end of the day, these people, Daniel Johnston, other outsider music you can look at, it's like the Shags, which is like a band who they were sisters, and their dad went to a palmist who told them that his daughters were going to change music, and they weren't allowed to listen to music until then. And then they were suddenly told, you're now only going to do music. And so they were put away, but they'd never heard any other music. So they just released this album that is mental, absolutely mental. But of course, people take it on, and it's just this freedom of expression. And like, pulling it back to comedy, I just think this is the thing that I can never get my head around with comedy. And the thing that always gets to me is that I can go on stage and make it look like I've just thought of everything, right? Like I'm just coming up with something now. But the funniest people in the world are the people who don't know they're funny. And by getting on stage, we're admitting that on some level we think we're funny, which is the least funny thing of all. It's like this paradox that you can never get round.
And that's the thing I always find with anything creative in the world. If you're talking about, on a level of there being enough comedy that you could watch for that back to back would take you till the day you die, there is enough comedy in the world. There is enough art in the world for you to not be able to look at everything before you die, after 80 years of looking at things. And there's more than enough music in the world. But anyone who then steps forward and goes, no, you need to hear my jokes, or no, you need to hear my opinion on this thing, or you need to see my painting, or hear my music, that's quite an interesting idea of self, or like self as important to culture. I know that a lot of people wouldn't say, I do stand-up comedy because I think that I'm important to culture. But there is a strange sort of half admittance of that.
And that's why I love this, is because like any outsider art, what are they hoping to gain from it? They're not hoping to gain any sort of acclaim or approval or commercial success. They're not hoping that they're going to become the next social commentator. They have to do it. They have to do it. It helps them. It could be in sort of therapy for their mental illness. They just have to create. And I'm always struck in comedy that, like, with some people, the part that I'm always trying to get it back to is this essence. And that's what it is. It's just like, you don't know why it's funny. You don't know what it is. You can't unpack it. You can't, see the mechanics of it. It just is. And that's something that inspires me all the time, and something that, like, when I try and sit down and write, I try and think like, okay, instead of trying to be funny, just try and tap into that thing, I wanted to tell you a story of it because, like, like you said, we can look at comedy from every which way possible. We can turn it around. We can study it from this way. But I know that on our deathbeds, we're not going to think of like that joke or this person. Somebody asks us, what is the funniest thing you've seen? It's going to be our friends doing stuff. And the funniest thing I've ever seen is my friend. We're at a pub, and my friend, who's quite awkward, this girl came up to him at the bar and drank a bit of his drink. And we were quite young at the time, so he didn't know what to do. He didn't have much experience with, flirting or sort of banter. And so he turned to my brother and said, she's just drank a bit of my drink. What should I do? And my brother just said, but drink a bit of hers. And so he grabbed her drink and went to drink it. And as he did that, he panicked and downed the whole thing.
Oh.
That's the funniest thing I've ever seen. Like the reaction, is those are the people. Those are the people that are the funniest people. Your friend down the pub, the person on the building site, and tapping into that essence. I just think is why I like outsider art. It's why I like outsider music. Is because it's just not polished. It's just there, and you've found it, and there's no reason for it.
Yeah, and that pure funniness doesn't actually benefit from being unpacked, like you said. And it's the same thing with there's like some art that does not benefit your emotional response to unpack it and learn about, what the artist was doing at the time and, the influences around them. Actually, some things, there is just that essence that you sort of have to leave be and just appreciate the fact that that is just so funny, or that is just so beautiful or powerful. And that is how I'm going to leave it.
Yeah. And with these people as well, like with most of them, you see any kind of outsider thing is normally because of some sort of mental illness, or it's because of some trauma, or it's because of, and part of me just thinks, like, is that the sort of price you have to pay for this unbridled creativity? Is that the sort of like, are you so overfilling with it that it just ends up being something that you can't fully control? It's just like you're a conduit for this. Oh God, I feel like I'm back in art school. A conduit for the thing, but
this compulsion.
Yeah, I just like those people who say sort of fuck the rules, and they don't even know those rules. They don't even know there's these things like Daniel Johnston. He didn't make art because he read comic books and stuff, and I'm not a huge fan of comic books, but he read it for the art, and ever since he was really, really young, and he learned, music and piano really young, and it's almost as if, like, I don't know, if I was going to be sort of religious about it, which I'm not at all, it's like, I just like those people who look like we're meant to do something, and there's nothing else you can do. I've got comedian friends where I look at them sometimes, and I hear them speaking, and I hear them talking about experiences they have, and I just think, you're so lucky that you found comedy. You're so lucky, because I can't imagine you working in a bank or an office, because it would just be absolute carnage. And it just makes everything sort of make sense. And that's how I'd like to be, because I feel, I don't know, looking at these people, it just kind of makes you think, just express, just do things, just make things, just write, even if you think it's all shit, just write. Just, you have to do that, because I'm never going to be that person, but if you can capture a little bit of that attitude, then I think it's great. I mean, it just, I don't know, for me it makes everything kind of make sense a bit, that your life, you can go to art school and you can hate it, but you realize that that was meant to happen, so you can get to this point.
Thank you so much for coming and talking to me this evening. It's been absolutely brilliant. Is there anywhere that we can follow you and just hear what you're up to?
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter. It's @RossSmith, which is a mistake I've yet to correct. I'm on Instagram @RossSmith1989. I'm not very good on socials. I don't really know what they do, but I can plug. Can I plug something?
Please plug.
I haven't got anything. It's not me, but there's a fantastic comedian, a good friend of mine, Rick Todd, and he's an artist as well, and I think he's going to start selling some of his sort of prints that he does, and they're sort of comedy drawings, and they're absolutely fantastic. And so maybe I can't ever be Daniel Johnston, but maybe I can sort of help out someone quite similar to Daniel Johnston.
Thanks so much for watching. You can follow Ross in the ways written below. As per usual, you can follow me at VeritababsArt on Instagram. Please make sure you've subscribed and give us a like, etc. And I'll see you next time.